You could feel it before anyone said a word. A tiny shift in his voice, barely a second long, but enough to make thousands of viewers sit up and lean a little closer to their screens. This wasn't Ben Shephard delivering headlines or gently teasing a co-host. This was something quieter, and somehow that made it impossible to look away. For years, Ben has been the kind of presenter people don't think twice about trusting. He's the calm in the studio, the one who can move from a light-hearted segment to a heavy news story without ever losing his footing. So when his tone softened recently, when that usual effortless confidence gave way to something visibly more vulnerable, it didn't feel dramatic in the way breaking news usually does. It felt personal. And that's exactly why it landed so hard with viewers watching at home. There was no shocking announcement. No dramatic exit. Just a pause, a breath, a moment where gratitude and weariness seemed to sit side by side in his expression. Many viewers noticed it immediately, and within minutes, social media had filled with messages asking if he was okay, thanking him, telling him to take care of himself. That reaction alone tells you something important. People weren't reacting to information. They were reacting to emotion they recognized in someone they've watched navigate early mornings and heavy news cycles for years without ever appearing to crack. It's worth pausing on why that kind of moment resonates so much more than a scripted, emotional segment ever could. Viewers are used to presenters delivering warmth on cue, smiling through difficult interviews, keeping the show moving no matter what's happening behind the scenes. So when the mask slips, even gently, even briefly, it reads as something rare and honest. It wasn't weakness. If anything, it read as the opposite, a person finally letting the exhaustion of consistency show through, if only for a few seconds. And Ben has actually spoken about this kind of pressure before, just not always directly. In recent interviews tied to his fitness journey around turning 50, he's talked openly about the physical toll of years on television, mentioning back issues, training injuries, needing more sleep than he used to. He's also spoken candidly in the past about his relationship with his own father, describing it as something that was once difficult before it slowly became something closer and more understanding. Comments like that don't happen by accident. They suggest someone who has been quietly reflecting on his own story for a while now, long before any single broadcast moment brought it to the surface publicly. That's part of what makes this feel less like a sudden crack and more like the visible tip of something that's been building gradually. Reaching 51 in an industry built around relentless early mornings and constant visibility seems to have nudged Ben toward thinking differently about pace and balance, rather than pulling back entirely. He's spoken about wanting to prove he could be in peak physical shape later in life, but there's a difference between chasing personal bests and quietly acknowledging that sustaining this lifestyle long-term requires more care than people often admit on camera. If these more reflective comments are anything to go by, this feels like someone recalibrating rather than retreating. What stood out to a lot of people watching wasn't just the moment itself, but how it was handled afterward. There was no dramatic follow-up segment, no attempt to milk the emotion for a bigger story. It was treated with a kind of quiet dignity, allowed to simply exist without being turned into a spectacle. That restraint, whether intentional or not, is part of why the moment stuck with people rather than fading into the usual churn of daily entertainment headlines. Sometimes what isn't said carries just as much weight as what is. There's also something worth noticing in how viewers responded, because it wasn't panic. It was affection. People began sharing their own stories, how Ben's voice had been part of a difficult commute, a lonely morning, a stretch of uncertainty in their own lives. That's the strange intimacy of daytime television. Viewers don't just watch these presenters, they live alongside them in small, repeated moments every single day. So when someone who has quietly become part of that daily rhythm shows even a flicker of vulnerability, it doesn't feel like celebrity news. It feels like checking in on someone who has, in his own way, checked in on you for years. Colleagues are said to have responded with warmth rather than concern for the show itself, more focused on Ben as a person than on any disruption to the schedule. That detail matters, because it suggests an environment where his well-being was treated as the priority in that moment, not the broadcast. Whether that becomes a longer conversation about pace and boundaries in his career is something only time will reveal, and nothing here should be read as confirmation of any bigger decision ahead. What lingers isn't the idea that Ben Shephard might slow down someday. It's the reminder that even the most dependable people carry more than they show, and that reliability isn't the same thing as invulnerability. For years, he's been the steady voice getting other people through hard mornings. Maybe this was simply the moment viewers got to quietly return a little of that care. Did you catch that shift in his voice when it happened, or did it only register once people started talking about it online? And what do you think mattered more in that moment, what Ben actually said, or everything he didn't need to say at all?